Alright, now that we've gotten the Saibu meme out of the way, we can officially start the video. So what is up everyone, Nerf Aurelia here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Akali rework that is now on PvE. I have a lot to say, so this is probably going to be a long video, so prepare yourself for that. If this is your first time here, then hello and welcome. I am a Plat Akali main who has been playing her since Season 3, and I have over 700,000 mastery points on her at the time of making this video. I've been playing her for a super long time, and she's easily my favorite champion. Just to preface the video, a lot of the clips I'm going to show are from the practice tool or from custom games against bots. It's almost impossible to get to a real game as Akali on the PvE right now, and I wanted to get this video out as soon as possible for you guys, so this is what I got. So without further ado, let's get into the discussion. First, I'm going to go into each individual ability, and then I'll go into her strengths throughout the game. So Akali's passive reads, damaging a champion with an ability creates a ring around them. When the ring forms, Akali gains a burst of movement speed towards it. Once she crosses the ring, Akali gains another burst of movement speed towards the enemy. Crossing the ring also empowers her combo, which increases the range and damage of her next attack. This attack also restores a small amount of energy. So one of my favorite things about current Akali is that to deal a lot of her damage, she has to proc her marks, like with her Q for example. So I'm super happy that marking enemy champions and needing to proc the mark to do a lot of damage was kept in the rework. It looks like proccing her passive is going to make up a pretty hefty amount of her burst damage, so players are going to have to adjust to getting out of the circle and then going back in. One important thing to note is that you do not need to hit the same champion you marked when you leave the circle. So for example, if I hit Ashe with my Q and then I leave the circle, I can choose to hit Fizz instead and still get the passive damage off. Akali's Q reads, Akali throws 5 kunai in a narrow arc, damaging enemies directly in front of her and slowing those at maximum range. If cast with nearly full energy, Akali heals for a percentage of the damage. At rank 5, 5-point strike deals extra damage to minions and monsters. Now I think this ability is absolutely nuts and is really well designed. So it has a whopping 1.5 second cooldown at all ranks, but it also has an insane cost of 100 energy at rank 1 and only goes down to 80 at max rank. I really like this ability because it feels really rewarding to hit, but consistently missing it punishes you super hard. If you just want to spam it and just hope that you hit something, then you probably aren't going to do well at all. So you'll definitely be able to see a clear difference between a good and a bad Akali player by just looking at how she uses her Q. Her Q is pretty okay for wave clear, but you can only use it twice before running out of energy, so using it to clear a wave can be pretty risky, especially if you're by yourself. One thing I don't like about the ability is that the heal is almost non-existent early game, and it still doesn't do much for her during the mid and late game because it's super hard to get off. You need at least 180 energy to actually get the heal in the first place, and when you're in the heat of battle that's already difficult to do. And even when you do get it off, it's still really not that much unless the enemy team is like super grouped together. So her sustain has been substantially nerfed and it's not very reliable like it used to be. I do believe the energy cost is a little too high for what it does, especially during the early game. I wouldn't mind if the cost was reduced to 80 at all ranks, or even scaled down to 70 from 100 or something like that. So as of now, that's what my opinion is of her Q.
I love what I do.
Akali's W reads, Akali restores energy and creates a cloud of smoke which slowly spreads to cover a ring-shaped area. While in the smoke, Akali is obscured and has increased movement speed. While obscured, Akali is stealthed, and though her position can be revealed, Akali herself can't be, meaning she can't be targeted by abilities or attacks, including by turrets. Akali can leave the smoke a few times to extend the duration of Twilight Shroud by a small amount. So new Twilight Shroud is definitely an incredibly strong ability. I think people are overhyping it a little bit and are making it out to be stronger than it actually is. It's definitely going to be crazy good in the right hands, but in my opinion, I don't think the ability is totally busted or anything. So obscured is a new term that is coming to League, so just to reiterate on what it means, I'll explain it a little more. So essentially it's the same thing as current invisibility, where the only thing that can reveal you is true sight. The difference is that even if you were revealed in your shroud, you are still untargetable. This means that if you are under a turret or get hit by Lulu's E or Lee Sin's Q for example, then the enemy team will be able to see you. However, they will not be able to target you with auto attacks or targeted abilities. You can still get hit by AoE abilities, so make sure to watch out for that. Just to remind you again, turrets will reveal Akali in her shroud, but you will still be untargetable, so the turrets will not attack you unless you do something to reveal yourself, like attack or leave the shroud. Akali's E reads, Akali backflips and throws a shuriken forward, damaging and marking the first enemy hit. The shuriken can also hit and mark the smoke from Twilight Shroud. Akali can reactivate shuriken flip to dash to the marked target, damaging enemies she passes through. This is definitely one of my favorite parts of the rework. Akali's current E is one of the most boring and bland abilities in the game, and the fact that it got replaced by something as cool as this just amazes me. This ability allows for a ton of outplay potential, which is why it's so cool. So when you initially throw the shuriken, you dash backwards away from it, and this is conveniently far enough to mark the enemies with your passive if you hit them with it. This means that you can E away from your enemy, and if it hits them, you can reactivate the ability and auto-attack them for an instant passive proc. Now this isn't even mentioning the fact that you can use this in your shroud for even more outplay potential. If you throw your E into Twilight Shroud, it will stick there, and then you can reactivate it to flip back to your shroud into safety. I'm absolutely in love with this ability, and it's easily one of my favorite parts about her new kit. Just make sure that when you throw her E, it'll actually hit something, or else you'll just flip away from your target and you won't be able to catch them again. Something else to note is that when you're dashing back to the target, you can cast abilities mid-dash. If you press Q or W, you will complete the dash to your target, but if you ult or flash, then you will not complete the dash. You can use this to protect yourself instantly from attacks, or to possibly get into a better position to land Q for the second part of her ultimate. So it just provides more utility for the ability, and it makes it super fun to play. I've done a lot of things with it where I've used like my Q mid-dash to get some extra damage in before I got to my target, and it's helped me snag some kills that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten. So I really like that part about the ability, and it's definitely something you should look out for when using it. Akali's ultimate reads, Akali dashes up to 2 times with a slight delay between. The first dash deals physical damage and briefly stuns, while the second dash deals magic damage based on the missing health of the enemy. Essentially what this ability does is let Akali dash anywhere and damages and stuns enemy targets that she passes through for the first activation. The second activation works as an execute and does an insane amount of magic damage to squishies and lower health targets. This is definitely an interesting change to her current ultimate. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. But one thing you should take note of is that you only get 2 dashes, and that's it. It has no charges, no resets, nothing like her current ultimate. It has a hefty cooldown, so you need to use the dashes very wisely. It's certainly fun to use, and I like this ability overall. One little trick that I've actually already discovered with her ultimate is you can buff her abilities during the dashes. So what I mean by that is during her first dash, you can buffer your Q, W, and E, so they all instantly go off after you finish the dash. This can be useful for when you want to do some extra instant damage or reposition yourself so you don't get caught and CC'd. Something that is really powerful about this is that after you complete the dash and use your E, you'll be right outside the range of your passive, so you can reactivate the E to go back in and proc your passive. During her second dash, you can actually use all of your abilities mid-dash instead of just buffering them. So this means that you'll get the execute damage and the damage from your Q at almost the same time. And you can put your shroud slightly behind you so you can retreat backwards if you get the execute on them. The interaction with your E is super cool as well. You can actually throw your E mid-air, so after you finish the execute, you can dash backwards and then reactivate E again to proc your passive. So you get your execute damage, the damage from landing your E, and the passive proc all in under like a second. It's kind of hard to time, especially against moving enemies, so it'll take some practice to get down. Similar to Shen's taunt and Gragas's body slam, you can extend the hitbox of either part of her ultimate by flashing mid-dash. So this is useful if the enemy you're chasing down is barely out of dash range, so you can flash mid-dash and hit him with that last bit of damage to kill him off. One last super cool thing to note is that if you use your ultimate right on top of an enemy, it puts you just outside the range of the circle, so you immediately activate your passive. So what you can do is you can buffer your E with the first dash, or throw the E in the middle of the second dash, and you'll flip right back to where your target is for an immediate passive proc. So you get the damage from your dash, and then an immediate passive proc. This one's a lot less practical than the others, but it's still a good thing to know if you ever need it. Alright, now I'm going to go over her strength throughout the game. So this has definitely changed compared to her current version. So first let's go into her early game. So Akali is really known for having one of the worst pre-6s in the entire game. Her early game is just beyond bad. But the new version of Akali actually has a pretty strong early game. I haven't been able to play against all of her matchups, but she definitely has a big advantage over most melee champions. Her Q is super easy to land against most of them, and it no longer draws minion aggro because it's not targeted, which is super nice. So what you can do is you can walk up to them and hit them with a Q and get a passive proc ready immediately. Then they either have to back off and wait for it to time out, or risk getting hit by an empowered auto if they try to trade with you or farm. You have to remember that her auto range is increased for her passive proc, so it's really easy to pull off as well. If you get Shroud at level 2, then they'll have no chance to retaliate you because you'll be stealthed. And then if you can weave around the minions once you hit level 3 and you get E, then it's possible to get First Blood with Ignite. I'm not really sure how she's going to do against ranged matchups at the moment, but I think she should be a lot better off. She's still susceptible to getting pushed into her turret and getting harassed, but I don't think it'll be as bad as before. However, her wave clear and ability to CS under turret is just god awful now. So you can use your Q to try to CS, but the problem with it is that it can mess up the other minions under the turret, and you can only use it twice before you run out of energy. Current Akali has her passive for Q and her E to CS under turret, which makes it pretty easy to do. New Akali doesn't really have anything at all going for her, so it's going to be really hard to adjust trying to CS under turret. So that's one of the potential problems I see with the early game. Other than that, it's not too bad. Her post-6 roaming potential probably isn't good as before because her ultimate is weaker. But I think if the enemy bot lane is pushed up, then she'll still be able to get free double kills if she roams down there. New Akali's mid-game is probably similar in strength to current Akali. If you got fed early, then you're definitely going to pop off and destroy the enemy team. But if you're behind, it'll be hard to get back into the game. I think it might be harder for the new Akali to get back into the game than it is for live Akali because she can't snowball as hard. But she should still do super well in skirmishes and be able to 1v2 and 2v3 no problem. Utilizing her Shroud is going to be super important because it is what enables her to weave in and out of battle and to get multiple passive procs off. So I think good Akali players will be able to capitalize on her Shroud and bad ones not so much. But for the most part, I think her mid-game is going to be about the same level as live Akali. Not too much difference there. Alright, now I'm going to go into the late game and team fights, and this is where it starts to get problematic for new Akali. So she no longer has her charge system or any resets, and her dash is no longer targeted, so her damage is a lot less reliable. I wanted to look over a clip from current Akali really quick to demonstrate how well she does in the late game if played properly. So you can see here that in this clip I'm able to dash all over the place and I can stick to my enemies and get all of my damage off. Since her Q and R are targeted, that means her damage is extremely reliable and she's good at killing priority targets. Now on average I find myself dashing 5 or 6 times in a team fight I do well in. And the problem here is that new Akali can only dash up to 3 or 4 times in a team fight, which means she's not as mobile as current Akali is, so she can't get around as much. I've taken this clip from Professor Akali's video just to demonstrate that she may not be as good in the late game. So all credit goes to him, and I'm going to put the link to the video in the description if you want to check it out. I'm going to let the clip do a complete run through first, and then I'm going to go back and talk about it.
Off of an earlier ward we had before they cleared it out. So what I want to do here is get my E onto them so that I can eventually dash in. I want to go into Shroud as fast as possible. Obviously nothing can reveal you anymore. Just create a distraction, get my passive procs, get my Qs off on whoever I can since it does AoE damage. Eventually I do decide to ult out because I don't want to risk dying, and my team is able to help me clear them out for a clean ace.
Alright, so now let's analyze this clip. So the first thing you can see him doing is going in and then doing some damage to Echo, and then he has to hide immediately in Twilight Shroud while Xayah finishes him off. He's only able to do a small amount of damage to MF before he has to retreat again and use Zhonya's, while Rammus kills her. He then has to immediately get out of the fight using the first part of his ultimate, while Xayah does more damage to the enemy team. He then is finally able to kill the enemy Jax with the second part of his ultimate and finish off Braum at the end. Alright, so now let's take a look at this from the perspective of the current Akali. And if we do that, this fight would have played out much differently. So the first thing that would have happened is that he would have dashed to Braum, and then he could have immediately used Q on MF. And then with Gunblade, Shadow Dance, and the Q proc, she would have been dead right away. He could have then put down Twilight Shroud and wait out the fight a little while Xayah does more damage. And then from there you can see that Warwick, Jax, and Braum are all super easy kills to get with a high amount of damage that Akali does late game, and that would have been the end of the team fight. So looking at this clip, in the case of reworked Akali, he really had to rely on his team to clean up all the kills for him, and then he got to last hit Jax and Braum at the end there. In the case of current Akali, he would have been the one doing all the damage and would have been able to take out the priority target right away by himself. So current Akali would have been able to clean everything up by herself, while new Akali had to rely on her teammates for help. Now, I'm not trying to say that Professor Akali is a bad Akali player and that he played that teamfight horribly or anything. I'm just pointing out that it would have been much easier for the current Akali to clean up the teamfight than it was for the new Akali like you saw in the clip. So this isn't to say that the new Akali is necessarily bad at team fighting. Her Shroud is still incredibly strong and she still has really high burst. However, the problem is that her damage is no longer reliable like the current Akali, and it takes a lot more work to kill high priority targets. So this is what makes her late game worse than current Akali's. I'm going to guess that her late game will still be pretty decent, but it's definitely substantially weaker than current Akali's. Now I'm going to talk about my overall thoughts on the rework. So I think that the rework turned out pretty okay for the most part. She takes more skill than before, but still has a lot of outplay potential. Her Shroud and New E are super fun to play around with, and her passive allows for more interesting gameplay, so I definitely like those aspects of the rework. I do, however, have a few problems with the rework. The first problem being that the energy cost on her Q is a little too high in my opinion. I would appreciate it if they lowered the energy cost at least a little bit. The ability should definitely be punishing if you miss it, but I believe that it is a little too punishing at the moment. So that's kind of just like a little nitpicky thing I have, so it's not too important, I guess. Another problem I have with her new kit is that she's just god-awful at CSing under turret. So like I pointed out earlier in the video, current Akali can use her passive, her Q, and her E to help CS under turret, and she does it pretty well. She doesn't have too many problems. New Akali, on the other hand, has almost nothing. Using her Q to help kill minions can mess up the other minions under the turret and can cause you to miss more CS. Her E is not a farming tool, and her passive isn't helpful for farming either because you can only proc it on champions. So I wish this could be addressed somehow, but I don't think there's much they can do about this. So, oh well, I guess it doesn't matter too much, but that's just one thing I don't like.
They can't stop.
She's also no longer good at split pushing either. So what made her a great split pusher was that she had unconditional on-hit damage to empower her auto attacks against turrets, and she could also use her E to get multiple Lichbane procs off on the turret if she decided to buy that item. And this isn't to mention that current Akali also had great wave clear late game, which makes pushing for her super easy. With the new Akali, you can try to use your Q to clear the waves, but you run out of energy after 2 uses, which is really bad. So not only is she no longer good at taking down turrets, but she's also bad at pushing waves as well. Split pushing was a good backup plan that Akali players could use against teams with good team fights, so you weren't useless to your team. And new Akali doesn't really have this option, which I don't like at all. Something that I found super disappointing in this rework is that she no longer has a charge system or resets in her kit. Something that made Akali very unique and that separated her from other assassins was that she could keep going after she killed her first target. Getting resets and dashing around a ton and cleaning up fights is really what made Akali different from other assassins, and that's one of the things that made her super fun to play, and it's why I played Akali. She was super reliable at taking down targets with her damage, which is something that gave her an edge over other assassins in the late game. New Akali is super reliant on her high cooldown ultimate to kick kills late game, and she's no longer reliable at getting near her targets. So the scary late game pentakilling monster that we all know and love is no more. This is probably the most disappointing part of the rework. I hope that Riot at least has some sort of reset mechanic out on her kit before she goes live, because this is something that's really important to longtime Akali players. An idea I had off the top of my head was that getting a takedown would reset her ultimate cooldown, But that might be a little busted, so I'm not exactly sure about it. I wouldn't be opposed to trying something like that on PBE before she hits live though. So one of the worst parts of the rework, in my opinion, is definitely the lack of a charge system or resets. Lastly, one thing that kind of irks me is that it takes forever to be able to use the second part of her ultimate. If they decrease the time a little bit, it would make her feel less clunky and more fluid to play. Being able to hold her second dash for a longer period of time would also be great, because currently I feel like I have almost no time to do more damage, and I need to use the second dash almost right away. So making a change or two to her ultimate like that would make her feel much nicer to play. Gameplay wise, those are really my only complaints at the moment. A few other miscellaneous problems I have with the rework are her walking animation and her VO and personality. So right now her walking animation is really just like a complete mess. If you take a look at these clips, you can see that her walking animation is nowhere near normal at all. Surprisingly enough, this is not how a normal human being walks, and it looks like she's quadruple jointed or something. So this is the way that it is for all of her skins. It's not just specific to her base, and I really hope that this is fixed as soon as possible. I think her in-game model is fine for the most part, but her walking animation is just absolutely awful. My other problem is her VO and personality. This is definitely something that's important to me, and I really don't like it at all. So Riot's goal with the Akali rework was to make Akali more mature, as a couple years have passed since she's left the Order. And I believe that they didn't really accomplish this goal at all. With her current VO, she sounds very mature and elegant, and her personality is kind of sassy, which I like, but she's still very serious about her duties as a member of the Order. Her new personality is very immature despite being a few years older. So yeah, she just feels a lot less mature than she did a few years ago, and she doesn't really have that spark to her voice that Laura Bailey gave her. She still has that sassy tone that a lot of players like, but her sassy quotes are no longer really elegant, and she doesn't seem to be serious at all about what she's doing. She sounds more like a rebellious edgelord who isn't very serious about her job at all. So let's just compare a few of her voice lines together to show you what I mean.
Another unworthy opponent. As balance dictates, hesitation is the seed of defeat. I suggest you run. I want to savor this. Mark acquired.
Come on, at least try. Everyone dies. I just speed things up. I'll make this look like magic. Like you had a chance. No one tells me what to do. Not anymore. Restraint's not really my thing. Well, you aren't much of a challenge. Oh, you're gonna bleed.
As you can see, she's no longer that sassy but still elegant young mature lady that she once was, and is now just a sassy and immature child. One thing that I was looking forward to is hearing Akali say more lines in game, but she only has like 10 total outside of special interactions. A lot of the newer champions have had VOs that have totaled over 10 minutes and even 15 minutes of time, but Akali's is barely over 5. I was looking forward to her new VO, but this was definitely a big letdown for me. I hope they do something to address her awful VO, but I'm not sure they will. Her laugh in particular is just god-awful, and she only has one laugh for some reason, which I don't understand at all. Overall, I definitely have some big problems with this rework, but for now, I think it turned out pretty okay. My opinion of the rework may change in a few weeks, and I may either fall in love with it or completely hate it, but that's what I think of it for now. Also, I know some of you probably want to know what I think of her new splash arts, so I'll just go over those really quickly. Just remember, these are my opinions, so take them as you want. First thing I have to say, obviously, is RIP to our side boob queen. She's no more, and I know we will all miss her very much. One thing that I really don't like about her new look is her short hair. One thing that I really loved about Akali was her long black hair that she had in a ponytail. I thought that looked super pretty and was definitely one of the reasons why I liked her so much. Now they've replaced it with short and edgy hair, and it really reminds me of like a female Yasuo, which is just super lame to me. Now I'm just going to compare all of her skins and say whether it is an improvement or not, and then rank them from best to worst. Her new base splash is definitely cool, and her dragon tattoo is really awesome. I love the fact that she's holding Helmet Bro in her hands and that there's a ton of stuff going on in the splash. I do really enjoy her current base splash though, because she just looks so much better. So I'm going to have to barely give it to her current base splash for this one. Stinger is super cool now. I wish it had a full body shot instead of just her upper half, but it is amazingly well done. So I'm going to have to give it to the new splash for this one. I don't think I even need to say anything about Infernal Akali. This splash is infinitely better than Crimson, no contest at all. New splash easily wins. All-Star looks super amazing now. Her current All-Star skin is super bland and lacks a lot of detail. The new one is super amazing and easily takes the cake. The new nurse skin is pretty okay. There's a lot of detail in it and it looks nice, but you can't beat the OG, so the current splash wins. The current Blood Moon skin has one of the best splashes in the entire game, easily, and the new one doesn't really capture the beauty of the current one. The new splash is still pretty decent, but it is nowhere near as good as the current one, so the competition isn't even close. The current one is the clear winner. The new Silver Fang is pretty bad. The immense detail in it is definitely great, but this almost looks like an Echo skin, which is just super awful. This isn't really Silver Fang anymore, and I don't like it. This looks like it would be an alternate splash art for Project Echo or something. So the current Silver Fang is infinitely better. Headhunter is basically the same, but the new one doesn't have long hair that I love, so I'm going to give it to the current one. Now, despite not having the longer hair in Sashimi, I still really like how they changed Akali in this one. It is definitely an improvement from our current one, and I like the skin much more now, so the new one takes the cake for this one. Ranking the skins from best to worst, I would probably put them at All-Star, Nurse, Infernal, Stinger, Base, Blood Moon, Sashimi, Headhunter, Silver Fang. Alright guys, so that does it for the video. I hope you found it informative and helpful. It took me hours to write the script for this, and I played a lot of games to get the clips for the video. I'm sure I'm going to have to render this monster of a video like 4 times, but that's okay. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, and if you have any feedback or questions for me, then feel free to leave a comment. I have a bunch of other videos that you can check out, and I always appreciate an extra sub, so click that button if you think I deserve it. Thank you so much for watching, and have a nice rest of your day.